What the hell are we supposed to use, man? Harsh language?
Have you guys heard of the MCU?
Yeah.
MCU? No, what is that? Some woke shit?
It's a derogatory way for people to say the MCU because it's becoming too female dominated.
There's more female characters than male characters.
You know, Marvin, if you can't include 51% of the Earth's population in movies because then it's just too woke.
Not acceptable.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's yeah. Anywho, we might have had the DCEU.
The fuck is that?
DCEU, the DC's extended universe, the DCEU.
Okay.
Is what some have say that we may have had under Toby Emmerich and what's his name, Walter Hamada, DC Films and Warner Brothers Picture Group. Apparently, before the new CEO David Zaslav blew everything up, the plan was to do a Flashpoint movie, which would basically wipe out the Snyderverse.
Yep.
And then you would have the new DCEU, which would be the Flash, and you'd have Batgirl.
Marketed on the back of Michael Keaton.
Correct. Yes. And you'd have Supergirl. And so you would have, because Robert Pattinson's Batman is not in the DCEU, it stands alone. It's in its own universe.
Yeah.
So what they were planning to do pretty much got all blown up because Warner Brothers did this shit, or they did a merger, and David Zaslav got to take control.
Right.
So it looks like the Snyderverse is going to be the timeline, and they're not going to do the Flash reboot. And so doing, like, there's stuff up in the air. Like, Ezra Miller is still in the Flash, even though he
for now
just recently got charged with felony burglary in Stamford, Vermont.
And apparently he was the leader of a cult in Norway.
Yeah, there's cult and grooming allegations as well. He's got a real shady past, but this is one that DC spent $200 million on. So they scrapped. We talked about this last week. They scrapped Batgirl, which was about $90 to $100 million in production and development.
Right.
And they scrapped that. This one is $200 million, and apparently is getting good reviews from early screenings.
Flashes.
So yes, the Flash. So they're going to hang on to this one and let it go, and then they're going to do a Flash season 9, and that's going to be the end of what many call the WB or the CW
verse. Right.
Yeah, the CW verse. But on that news, Greg Berlanti is the chief engineer behind the Arrowverse, which is on CW, and he's being strongly considered to be the Feige-esque guy for DC Films.
Well,
so that may be where we go from here, even though they're killing everything, and the Snyderverse is the timeline, because this puts everything up in jeopardy. Like Michael Keaton and Robert Pattinson, like the next Robert Pattinson Batman is questionable right now. Like they're saying it's not been greenlit, it's still quote unquote in development, but it hasn't been greenlit. And so they're basically saying, yeah, work on it, we'll see what happens. But Ben Affleck is being stated as re-recording screens for the Flash, and he's also confirmed by Momoa to be an Aquaman movie. So they're going back to Affleck, and Keaton may not even show up in the DC anymore. So
yeah, I don't know. They got to get their shit together. As a fan, like I have no loyalties to either of the DC versus Marvel bullshit. But like, I just want to see these characters get like a fucking like good representation, and I don't mean like woke representation. I mean like actual stories that do these characters justice. Which honestly, I'm not a writer or a director or a filmmaker in any way, but like, it doesn't seem that fucking difficult to me when you have like literally 80 years of source material to just pull stories from. Just do the story. Like Zack Snyder, you know, I am very vocal about not liking Zack Snyder, nor his vision for the Justice League or the DC or whatever. And I am a big fan of the Watchmen film. And the Watchmen film is so good, just like 300 is so good, and he got notoriety for being able to be like the comic book guy because he literally took what was on the fucking page and put it on the screen, almost beat for beat. Just do that. I don't understand the fucking problem. You don't have to fucking rewrite the fucking shit and make it for modern audiences or whatever. Just give us the shit, especially with Superman. I'm sorry I'm going off on a little bit of a rant, but like, you know, Superman, in a time like this, such a tumultuous time in world history as we're living in, with like, you know, pandemics and weird politics and weird culture war shit and like wars and like all sorts of stuff, the world needs Superman. When Superman came out, he was a symbol of hope for not only the characters in his stories, but like the readers. Like, we need Superman. Give us the symbol of hope, not this depressed fucking idiot that's sitting around wondering if he should be Superman. There's never a question in his head of whether or not he should be Superman. It's his duty. He knows it. God, just make a fucking good Superman movie, please, Lord.
We're here because of a difference of opinion at people at the top. I mean, you had Zack Snyder doing the Snyderverse, and some people loved it, some people hated it, but he was trying to tell a coherent story. And yeah, there was, you know, whatever happened with the executives and everything to get him thrown off, to get the movie redone by
Whedon.
What's his name? Yeah,
Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon.
Joss.
Joss. Yeah.
Lipgate.
There was just people. There were executives that didn't like the Snyderverse, and they're pretty much all gone. Lost their titles, lost their positions, lost their power, and the Snyderverse moves on. Even though Zack Snyder's no longer involved, it looks like they're gonna try and carry off the backs of this. But I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, they can clean it up. But as to your point about Superman, I was having this conversation with my roommate. Superman has a bit of a problem that nobody can really relate to him.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, Batman is a far more popular character because he's just a human. He's a great detective. You know, sure, maybe you can't relate to him relate to him being a billionaire and orphan, but he's just a guy that is smart and uses his wits. Like Superman, like there's no situation where Superman technically just doesn't win. Like,
well,
it's like Superman is the superhero you want to be as a kid, but when you're an adult, you like the grittier, more realistic
not me.
Portrayal.
Well, so Stan Lee, I think, I don't know the exact quote, but he's on record saying things along the lines of like, you know, you have these super people that are not relatable really because, you know, nobody has powers and powers aren't real. But the relatable aspect of these heroes is the very human experiences they go through.
I thought it would be fun to learn what is a superhero's life like when he or she isn't being a superhero. So I tried to play up their personal lives also.
And that's why I've always gravitated more towards Marvel than DC. The DC characters are way more mythical and fantastical, aliens and gods and all this stuff. Right. And there are those in Marvel too, but a lot of the Marvel heroes are just people with abilities, right?
Yes.
And, you know, I would argue that I watched a video on this fairly recently about the problem with Superman. I may have sent this to you, actually. The problem with Superman is that, like, it's hard to write a compelling story about him because, and it's a criticism Superman gets a lot, is that he's too powerful. He can't be defeated. He can't do the, you know, he's Superman, right? But people don't seem to realize that Superman is a tragedy in that he has these abilities. He could do all these things, but there are still things that he can't do. And that is summed up in the comic books by the death of his adopted father, Jonathan Kent. Jonathan Kent dies of a heart attack. And despite all of Superman's power, he cannot do anything about that. Okay, that's just life taking its course. That is the foundational element of Superman's characters, that he can't do it all, right? And Zack Snyder took that in Man of Steel, and instead of having that tragedy unfold, he decided it was a good idea to have Superman stand by and watch his father get whisked away into a fucking tornado not doing anything. That is so out of character for the character of Superman that immediately that it's ruined, because he would never do that.
How does a good man live? What is virtue? When does a man's obligation to those around him exceed his obligation to himself?
He's never going to be the guy who's like, oh man, the world doesn't accept me. I don't get it. No, it's instilled into him by not only Jonathan and Martha, but also Jor-El, that you have a duty, given your abilities, to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves.
They can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, their capacity for good. I have sent them you.
And he knows this and accepts it with full-on embrace. And that's what Zack Snyder missed in Man of Steel, and that trickled through the rest of the DCEU, because he framed the entire Justice League around the notion of, like, Superman is an alien who some people like and some people don't.
I mean, we should really have a conversation about that movie if we want to go into it.
We can eventually.
I could counter some of this stuff.
Yeah, let's. We went off on a little bit of a tangent. We'll save that for another time. Yeah. But that is my overall issue with the DCEU. I know, Marvin, you haven't seen it, but I'm sure you can understand my sentiment, right? It made sense.
Made sense.
And just get your shit
together. I'd love
together.
to hear Dusty's side too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. We should do a video. Do we want to review Man of Steel?
Well, I mean, just quick and to the point, we can. I would say that it was him not wanting Clark Kent to be exposed because he wasn't dressed up as Superman. He knew that if he came to save him, that everybody would know that Clark Kent was Superman and Clark Kent had the powers, and everybody would know it was Clark Kent. That was more of like him protecting his son than saying don't be Superman, because what he did there allowed him to be the Superman that he was. But anyhow,
We'll do a different
go down this
tangent
tangent
on that.
We could debate that in a separate video. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. I mean, listen, there's no right opinion. It's just, I don't know.